Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 12 of the Nugget Climbing Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Dimmitt. Today's guest on the podcast is my friend Mike Doyle. Mike is an elite level rock climber who's been climbing 514 for more than 20 years. Some of his most notable ascents include the first ascent of Lucifer, a 514C in the Red River Gorge in 2006, and more recently, his repeat of the notoriously hard Necessary Evil, another 14C at the Virgin River Gorge, which Mike climbed in 2015, and which we talked about a fair amount in this interview. We talked about some of the lessons he learned from more than 10 years of coaching and competing, including the best piece of coaching advice Mike ever got. We talked about training and how he thinks about block training and when to use it. We talked about onsighting tips, his favorite climbing shoes that he uses for onsighting, as well as his other go-to climbing shoes. We also talked about his career as a software engineer and about working extra remotely, as Mike calls it, and where Mike hopes to take his work and his climbing in the future. And we talked about climbing the Canadian Alpine Trilogy in the Canadian Rockies, which he did along with Sasha DeJulian in the summer of 2018. As always, all the articles, videos, and routes we mentioned are linked in the show notes over at thenuggetclimbing.com. So if you're curious about anything from the interview, you can head over there and check them out. This episode was recorded pre-coronavirus. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy out there. Maybe getting some good training in on the hangboard. Maybe we'll all come out of this stronger. You never know. Be well, friends, and as always, thanks for listening. Please enjoy this conversation with Mike Doyle.
Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
So I listened back through your interview with Neely on TrainingBeta from like 5 years ago.
Yep.
And you were saying that you were eating oatmeal with peanut butter and banana. Is that still your go-to breakfast?
It is. Yeah, had it this morning.
You did?
Yeah.
Any other ingredients?
Blueberries, apples sometimes, some nuts. Still my go-to.
What if you're really treating yourself to a nice breakfast?
Oh, French toast, bacon. In fact, I would say the best breakfast I've ever had is at One Street Down Diner in Redmond.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah, they've got coffee maple glazed bacon.
Oh my God.
It is phenomenal.
Why have you been holding out on me?
No,
or?
I thought it was like a known thing.
No.
Oh,
the
yeah.
other locals have been holding out on me.
Oh yeah, I purposely plan rest days to go to there.
On
and then
One Street Down?
Yeah. It's called One Street Down.
Have you even been there?
On 7th
I
or
just
6th.
finally went there recently.
Yeah, but did you get the coffee?
No.
So they take like
Definitely
coffee
not.
grounds, like fresh coffee grounds, maple glazed bacon.
Yeah.
Douse it in coffee grounds and then fry it up. It's
Oh my gosh.
heaven. Yeah.
I'll have to go back for that. Cool. We're rolling.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
Thanks
Good
for
to see you.
Yeah, you too. Good. Thanks for hanging out in the van.
Yeah, sorry it's raining for your first day in Las Vegas.
I know I've been joking that I'm here on a climbing gym trip, but fun to check out your climbing gym.
Okay, that's good.
Yep. Had a great session. So one thing that's interesting, I was kind of, in my prep for this, I was pulling up information on you, and of course we've known each other for a number of years, but something I'd totally forgotten about, and I don't think people have heard much about, is your coaching career.
Okay, yeah.
So you first started out in climbing, indoor climbing, and competition climbing, but that really quickly transitioned into you coaching.
Right. Well, I mean, I started outdoor climbing
Okay.
Through a program in my high school, and then a friend of mine, basically my best friend in high school, was the first one of us to get a car, and he was super into climbing, so we just every weekend we went climbing.
And you're in Vancouver area?
In Kelowna.
Okay.
And then a climbing gym opened up there, and then through the winter, I remember that first winter after it opened, I spent every night at the climbing gym.
Okay.
And then transitioned to competition climbing from there as a way of staying motivated through the long Canadian winters.
Got it.
And then transitioned to coaching from that.
Uh-huh. I was listening to an interview that you did with Neely Quinn, I think 5 years ago, and I'll link to that in the show notes. It's a great interview that I'd recommend to anybody. But I think you said in that you started climbing around 13, 14, but then you really started climbing like at 16, 17. So
Yeah.
Is that when that climbing gym opened, I assume?
Yes, and when my friend got his car.
Okay.
I mean, other than that, you're riding your bike around town.
Right.
And, I was more into mountain biking probably at 13, 14. That's what my brother's friends were doing.
Uh-huh.
And I would climb a couple times a year, but definitely not specific. And then I was also more focused on mountaineering, which now I look back at and I laugh at. But yeah, we would do, like, the program in my high school was a mountaineering program. And we would do rock climbing just as rope management training basically for mountaineering.
Huh.
But then I realized that mountaineering is a lot of time in the snow and in a tent.
Yes.
Or at least at the time it was. And now there's obviously people doing crazy stuff that I wish I could get into.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was just, so then rock climbing kind of took over.
How many trips did you do in the mountains before that lesson really sunk in?
There was a lot of years of the school year's 10 months long. We would do one trip a month.
Oh, okay.
With the program, and then I would do additional trips outside of that. But it was actually after I'd graduated high school, and I'd booked or planned a trip to go do Mount Robson, which is the tallest peak in the Canadian Rockies, and spent a week sitting in a tent. And I remember it was perfect climbing temperatures or perfect climbing conditions in Skaha at the time.
Okay.
And I remember just being like, this sucks. Like, I can't believe I'm here playing cards, day in, day out, when I should be rock climbing.
Yeah,
and
got it.
Don't think I've put on a pair of plastic boots since.
So then was it university that took you to Vancouver and the North Vancouver gym?
Yep. So I moved to Vancouver for university.
Okay.
And then the North Vancouver gym already had a fairly established junior team program.
Okay.
And the head coach there asked me to come coach. And I'd already been coaching for a few years outside of that gym.
Okay.
Yep.
How old were you at the time?
So when I started coaching, I was probably 18, but I was coaching 15, 16-year-olds, basically just wanted training partners. And then when I started coaching in North Vancouver, I was probably 20, maybe 19, 20, 21, somewhere in there.
Okay. And the reason it really captured my curiosity and I wanted to dive into it is because I had just done an interview with Will Stanhope, and I'd forgotten that he was a part of that team, at least.
Absolutely.
For a little while. And of course, people probably know that Sean McCall came out of that program, Jason Kruk. It's a really stacked field of climbers that went on to do amazing things that came out of that program. So,
and so even before those guys, if you follow any international news, there's a climber called Reed McAdam from North Vancouver who's put up a bunch of 14s, mid 514s, 14 pluses, kind of in the Middle East and in North Africa and other places. But so the climbing program actually started, in fact, I think even junior competition climbing kind of started in the Northwest, Seattle, Vancouver area. And so in the early 90s, there was a program that was sponsored by Arc'teryx at this gym called The Edge. And so it was the Arc'teryx Edge junior team. So by the time even Will, I think, was one of the early members, but when he was 7 years old, he was a member of that team. And then by the time Sean came around, Sean started climbing at 9, 10. The program was already established for quite a few years, and he had people that were 16, 17, 18 to look up to see how the training and focus on competition and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so I used to compete against those guys that were on the Edge junior team. And that's actually another reason why I wanted to start a team where I was, is because I looked at them as having this team, and they had training partners. So I started the team in Kelowna and basically used that as motivation to train and stuff like that. And then I moved to Vancouver and started coaching at the Edge.
Okay.
But Sean Fader was the first person, I believe, to start the Edge junior team, and then Andrew Wilson took over for him. And Andrew Wilson is still the head coach of Canadian climbing. So still involved, still actively pushing people. It's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Can you point to anything in particular that you think you guys were doing well there that allowed that group to be so successful?
It was the culture. I mean, like I said, if you have, because it was one of the oldest programs, you see when the young kids come in, they see the older kids, what they're doing and the amount of effort they put in and training and stuff like that. So because you have this focus from the older kids kind of, mentoring the younger kids, it's easy for the younger kids then to see okay, training is supposed to be kind of a serious thing. And now, when I came, I definitely brought a competition experience background to it, because I was already competing in back then it was the ASTF Nationals.
Was this all lead climbing?
Yeah, even bouldering outside didn't exist in Squamish at the time. It's ridiculous when I think back on it. But there was bouldering competitions, but they were done in combination with route climbing. They were basically just mini routes, that's kind of how they were done. But it was all focused on the difficulty lead climbing. And even the team we coached, the kids only competed at lead climbing. We did speed climbing only at the Worlds. And so it was kind of a joke to us. We would make the kids, do speed climbing because we thought it was fun. But some of them would dress up in costumes, and some of them would, do well. But yeah, it was kind of a joke to us.
Gotcha.
Now I see speed climbing being taken seriously and bouldering being taken seriously, and it's different.
And you ended up doing that for, 10 years?
Yeah, about 10 years.
Were you competing the whole time?
I did. I continued competing, not a super high level. Going through university, competition climbing was my focus. And then once I graduated university and I was working full time, it was harder to focus on competition climbing and even, difficult sport climbing. It's easier to focus on projecting something where if conditions aren't right, if you don't feel right, you just come back the next day. Whereas competition climbing, you train 6 to 8 months to peak for one day. And if something happens, like I remember very distinctly, there was a competition down in Mexico that I trained really, really hard for. But the week before the competition, I was busy at work and I didn't get a lot of sleep and stuff like that. So then I showed up in competition in Mexico knowing it's hard to turn that away. It's hard to know that you showed up and you're not in peak condition. Whereas you want to stage the last week before a competition. You want to have stuff ready, prepped.
Yeah. And
then show up and be psyched and excited. But it's hard the day of the competition to focus and knowing that in the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, but you're exhausted. You haven't slept in a week, So I think that was 2004. I've done a few World Cups since, but only as hey, I can go enter a World Cup. I've done a few the ones in Atlanta when they were held there, and in Denver and Boulder.
Okay.
But that's just because they were available in North America.
Gotcha.
I've done a couple in Europe back in the early 2000s, but didn't do well.
Got you. I've heard you say that you were much more successful coach than you were a competition climber for yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think allowed you to be such a good coach? You actually, we were just in the climbing gym, and I
could repeat that.
I asked you that, and you said kind of tongue in cheek that it was because you were an asshole.
Yeah, it's because I'm an asshole. I can point out what you're doing wrong, and I have no problem telling you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I think there's a few things, and I mean, obviously, I worked with good people, like working with Andrew Wilson. He brought a different aspect of the training than I did. When I first started coaching, I coached the way I had been coached in other sports, and coaching.
Real quick, what other sports?
Oh, I did everything: hockey, soccer, even though you wouldn't believe it, basketball, volleyball, track and field.
Yeah, how tall are you?
Yeah, 5'5". Lacrosse. I mean, basically anything to get out of the house. So
okay.
Was never really exceptional at any of them, but you kind of pick up tips from coaches you liked, coaches you didn't. But my way of coaching was very much to challenge the people, and to try and maybe even pit them against each other. When I first started. And the funny thing is that does not work at all. In climbing, especially because climbing's an individual sport, you really have to tailor your coaching to the individual athletes. And, coaching girls, I don't want to generalize, but coaching girls is different than coaching boys. And obviously you have to create an individual relationship with everybody, but I would try and pit 13-year-old girls against each other, and that really quickly realized that that's not a good thing, as it is. And this is going to be generalization, and I don't want people to take this to heart, but
sure,
quite often the women that are already getting into climbing, and I think it's different nowadays because it's much more acceptable, but they were already kind of putting themselves out there in a male-dominated sport. And then to have them pitted against each other just was not a good thing. And so I think it was probably Andrew that pretty quickly was hey, that's not, let's take a different approach. And then I started taking, really try to get to know the kids themselves. And I mean, I'm talking late 90s, early 2000s. And some of those kids are still some of my best friends to this day.
Oh, that's so cool.
So you create these relationships where you're simple things hey, how was school today? And how'd your math test go? Just little things, but then you learn how to kind of push them and trigger them and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, and then how to make them perform on that day, just little things you would say to one kid certain something, and then another kid you would say something I used to coach the national team, but you'd only get the kids on the national team for a week before the competition. So we'd usually do a training camp maybe early summer, and then the competition was either late August or mid-September, somewhere in that time. But you were expected to know these kids in that 1 week, So we even came up with ways of little trigger questions that we would want to ask the kids. And some of them were based off my experience. I remember being at a competition once and my foot slipped and I heard my mom gasp, because you trigger off familiar sounds and you can always hear people cheer. And it made me tense on the wall. So then my mom was never allowed to watch me compete again.
Oh, wow.
Well, until I became a little more competent and comfortable with that. Then I don't care anymore. Obviously now, if I haven't done a competition in years, but I'm sure I wouldn't care now if my mom came to watch me. Whereas my dad was really stoic and, all I wanted him to do was tell me to breathe, So as soon as I left the ground, he would just be like, breathe, Mike, breathe. And I'd hear this metronome in the background being like, breathe, Mike, breathe, as I was climbing.
Yeah.
And that really, really helped. And then once it became a little more comfortable, like I said, with all that stuff. And he would still show up at comps, but he knew his role, even though I didn't need it anymore, but it made me laugh. He would just be like, breathe, Mike, breathe. And people would be kind of look at him like, what? He's like, it's my job. No, and I really did appreciate it. But because of those things from my competition experience, I would ask questions of the kids like that. Like, is there anything I say? Is there anything, that triggers you that you don't want, that you want? Like some people don't like being told good luck because luck has nothing to do with it. Some people don't want to be like, oh, you're going to crush. Like, that puts too much pressure on them. And so you have to have these conversations with them and then go into a competition and be like, okay, let's review afterwards. Now, did that work for you? Some people like laughing on the wall. I remember Vicky Weldon telling me I had to yell in a massive auditorium. She just wanted to hear me cheer for her, yell fuzzy purple slippers. She wanted to embarrass me. But I'm like, I'm good. Like, I will do anything for these kids to perform well. If you want me to yell fuzzy purple slippers at the top of my lungs, and I've got a fairly powerful voice, I will. And so she was like halfway up the wall of qualifiers. She's doing really well. I'm like, fuzzy purple slippers. And I started turning around and laugh. And then she just cruised, But it made her laugh. And that's what she wanted.
Oh, super interesting.
Yeah. Huh. I don't know if I yelled at her a couple times, like outdoor climbing since then, but I don't think I've used that one in a competition since. But then other kids, you'd be like, like relax, be strong, send it up. Like that's what you use on them. Like, you kind of right before they go out, or some people it's like, they don't want to relax. They want to be aggro, and yeah.
Were most of the kids self-aware enough to know what they needed or what they wanted?
No, you had to really try.
Like,
and then
talk through
I would say the biggest challenge we had being from a small community up in Canada, there wasn't a lot of competition around, and there wasn't a lot of high-level competitions. So someone like Sean McCall, his only competition of the year was at the World Championships. Nationals, there was some kids that could challenge him a little bit, but he would have to screw up to lose. So after he won Nationals 3 times in a row and had already won Worlds a few times, we started only focusing him on Worlds. We wouldn't even focus on Nationals because the chances of him placing 5th and below and not making the team was almost 0. But we really wanted him to win Worlds, and he ended up winning 5 of 6 Worlds or something like that. Oh, wow. But other kids were the same way. They just didn't have a challenge other than once a year at Worlds. So these really intricate, like the mental battles, we'd only get to experiment once a year. Nowadays, I think it's much more. There's many more competitions. But like we encourage our kids to go and try and do the European youth circuit, or go down to Seattle if there was a big competition, or fly to Denver if there's a big competition. But yeah, I'd say that was the biggest challenge we had, was actually finding those important enough competitions where it mattered if you were on or not.
So they could learn what helped them thrive. And
and then to be able to have that discussion afterwards about what worked, what didn't.
Got it. Oh, that's super interesting. So it sounds like you got into coaching, and I don't know how much of a joke this is, but it sounds like it was a little bit self-serving. Like you just wanted training partners.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But then, you just expressed that you really loved it, that you really cared about it, that you were willing to do anything to help your kids do better. And, and I still see that kind of supportiveness in you when I see you out at the crag, wherever we are.
Yeah.
Was that there right away in your coaching, or did that kind of grow in time?
No, I'd say that was there right away. But, even like those kids when I was 18 and they were 15, 16, some of those people I still keep in touch with and climb with, but again, like my coaching style was much more brash at the start. Like I get terrified lead climbing still. I still every so often have to force myself to take falls just to get it over with. Whereas back then I'd be like, don't be scared, you can't be scared, blah blah, even though I'd be myself terrified.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So because that's how I thought you were supposed to coach.
I would have never guessed that, by the way.
Well, I'm a little more comfortable in like places like Smith Rock now than I used to be. But yeah, like this will make you laugh. Like on Rude Boys, the first time I got on Rude Boys, I couldn't get up the slab. It was too scary. And the bottom part wasn't that problem. So I actually went up Dreaming, set a top rope off the anchors of Dreaming.
No kidding.
And top roped the Rude Boy slab, which was terrifying.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it made sense.
Yeah.
And then I set up the Rude Boys slab with like 10-foot runners on every bolt.
No way.
But when I did Rude Boys, like the next fall, I didn't even have, back then there wasn't a bolt where at the upper protection, you just like, put like a cam or nut there. I didn't even have that. Okay. And I just cruised it. Like, I don't know what happened, but like you just kind of get a little more comfortable with the terrain, knowing where you're going.
That's really interesting.
But onsighting, scary run out stuff, there's no way I could have done that.
If anything, I would kind of put you in the more bold climber category in my brain.
If I rehearse something, for sure.
Okay,
Like on Spank the Monkey
Yes,
or
exactly.
stuff like that. Like Spank the Monkey, the cruxes are really well protected. Like they are right at the bolts.
Uh-huh.
So you just have to be comfortable climbing. I mean, in case people don't know, it's a 13D arete on monkey face with, potentially 20 feet. Well, not potentially. It has 20 feet between bolts.
Yeah. You know what? Real quickly, I'd been told from Will Nazarian, and I think this is a true story.
It's
yeah.
true.
So I think he maybe he had put up the 12A. So the 13D is an extension to that goes all the way up the wall. And he had kind of lowered in and put some bolts just to look at the route, intending to come back and add twice as many bolts if he was actually going to try to climb it. Never got around to it. Then Tommy shows up, sends it. And
now you have to do it.
It's been that way ever since.
And I think those were just cleaning bolts, and they're still there.
Yeah.
Like those are not full strength bolts. So you're going 20 feet between bolts, taking potentially massive falls, and I don't think they've been replaced.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And to back up, I feel like we owe some listeners some more context. So Rude Boys is a 13B or C at Smith. The bottom part's hard. The slab's, 11 plus maybe, 11, 5'11".
But even then, the 5'11 part's well protected. It's just 5'10 slab climbing.
Yeah.
But this is Smith Rock slab climbing, not Yosemite Squamish slab climbing. It's edges and footholds.
Yeah. There's actually holds. Yeah. So you climb the Dreamin' is a 12A to the right of it. So you climb that, set up the top rope, and
which
then
now I look at it now.
Where did you find all the 10-foot runners?
Oh, just like chopped old ropes. I don't even know. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. But I can't remember. Somebody called it like the Canadian variation or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. But then, like I said, I didn't do it. And I came back a year later and just in that time had become more mentally comfortable.
Interesting.
And did it without even that. So I went 40 feet from the last bolt to the anchor,
You think just from repeat exposure, just growing your comfort zone?
Yeah. And just also climbing different styles, climbing at Squamish a lot more, that kind of stuff. And I think when I first got on Rude Boys, I'd never done a 513 even. So not that should matter on a 5'11 when you're climbing 513, but it did. Yeah.
Have you always been your own coach?
Yeah, I mean, I take advice from people for sure. And I think you kind of have to. But yeah, I've never had an official coach or anything like that. But I've definitely, talked to people about training ideas. Yeah.
It's interesting. So to back up a minute, you were kind of joking about yourself being an asshole, which allows you to be such a good coach because you're able to help people identify their blind spots, right? But that's so much more difficult, at least for me, to do for myself than, it's easier to see it in other people. Are you able to catch your own blind spots?
I know what they are, but working on them is another thing.
Okay. Yeah, how do you think about that?
Yeah, like I mean, I'm, short at 5'5", being more flexible would really, really, really help me in climbing in a lot of ways, but it's just not something I've ever worked on because I don't enjoy it. And I mean, that's not true. I worked on it actually quite a bit when I was competing.
Okay.
Like in university and stuff like that, when I was competing, I tried to work on it. It just didn't have a lot of effect. But once I started working full time, climbing was an escape. And as soon as even training, like even, I go back to like fingerboard training or weight training or something like that, at least that's kind of fun. You see progress and stuff like that. But every time I tried to stretch or tried to work on flexibility, it always felt like a chore. And climbing still supposed to be an escape for me that I just would give up. So I think I can see my weaknesses. I just don't work on them. I wouldn't pay myself to coach myself. That's for sure.
What about with the more physical sides of coaching and training? Did you work on that with your athletes?
Absolutely. And Andrew Wilson, the head coach of the Edge team, he had a background in kinesiology. Okay. So he would kind of schedule that stuff, and then I would adapt it maybe to be a little bit more sport specific, some stuff. But I would also do a lot of research. I would talk to other coaches, look at gymnastics programs, other body weight related exercises, and developed exercises based off of that. But the reality is, it's like, strength training has been around for a long, long time, and the body weight specific stuff isn't that new. And a lot of people are coming up with new things now, but in my opinion, it kind of seems a little gimmicky. I think most of what people call strength training is actually just technique. I differentiate between strength, power. Like, I think strength is the actual recruitment of the muscle, and then power is the ability to utilize that quickly in terms of like campsing, stuff like that, or dead pointing accurately. So I think a lot of people that look at campsing as strength training, but it's not. It's not effective strength training. Okay. It's effective technique. Absolutely. You will learn how to contract your fingers quicker, aim better, all that kind of stuff. And it's effective and it's useful, but you're not going to make muscular adaptations that quote unquote will make you stronger.
Got you. Are there a few key exercises that you could point to that you think were most effective with your athletes or for yourself?
No, the thing is, especially coaching teenagers, they're going to get stronger. Like we would definitely cycle. We would do strength training, bouldering, endurance. We would have cycles, but they're going to get stronger just by getting in the gym. And so I think the best advice I ever got was from the Spanish coach. And at the time, I can't remember his name now. But at the time, they were the top team in the world, the Spanish team. And so I, wanted to know, like, hey, what do you do? Because I figured he had some magic,
Yeah.
He's like, just make the environment fun. Make the kids want to come to the gym. They'll get strong.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah. And that's like, even to this day, like you get a 12, 13-year-old kid in there, like into the gym 3 times a week, and then make them want to come 4 and 5 times a week outside of practice. They're going to get strong.
Huh. Does that change for adults?
Yeah, it's harder to get strong.
That same kind of approach, though. I mean, do you think it could be that simple? It's just, I don't know.
Just get to the... I mean, honestly, I don't think you have many adults that don't already have the fun part. I think it's easy as a teenager to kind of get forced into stuff because your parents signed you up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then if they only come the 3 days a week when you're training, they're not going to get strong. They're not going to get that much stronger, Whereas if they come that additional 4th and 5th day a week with their friends that they've made from the team or friends or whatever, they're going to get a lot stronger or a lot better even, not necessarily stronger, but the adaptations are going to happen much better. But same thing with adults. Like if all you do is you strength train 3 days a week, you're going to get strong. And there's lots of guys out there, you see them that are ridiculously strong, but they can't rock climb worth crap because they haven't had that exhausted session where they're learning how to move efficiently just because they want to stay an extra hour with their buddies, And that's when you learn technique, is when you're tired.
Interesting. So I want to dig into a little bit more of your training, and I'll refer to the TrainingBeta podcast episode that you did. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes. You guys really went into the nuts and bolts of your training for Necessary Evil, which is a 14C that you did at the VRG 5 years ago.
Yep.
So again, I'll link that in the show notes. But a few things did stand out from that I was really curious about, that I had some questions. It sounds like you were doing these training blocks in the summer that was kind of the off season, and you were really focused on heavy fingerboarding.
Yeah.
Maybe some lat pull downs.
Yep.
It sounded like a really simple program. Maybe
super simple.
Some running.
But strength training is simple. Strength training is simple. Just, push your muscles and, then you can do variations on it. But, especially for some of the major muscle groups, it's simple. And your forearms are a major muscle group.
They are. I think you broke it down. I think you were hangboarding twice a week, maybe running twice a week, and then climbing once a week and doing easier routes or something like that.
When I was pure strength training, I wasn't running at all.
Okay.
Because you want all your recovery to go towards the strength training portion of it. When I'm trying to lean out and get more towards like fitness and stuff like that, then I would run. And for me, I had to do road running at a kind of slower pace, or else my legs would get too big.
Okay. Interesting. Have you always thought about strength training for climbing in that way? And what I mean by that is, do you prefer to approach it in block training in the off season versus trying to integrate it into
No, I didn't.
Season when you're climbing?
I didn't always think that. I always had the idea of peaking though, like for competitions. And so there you would have some stuff lead up, but I generally, I didn't back away to pure strength training for years. And in fact, I wrote a coaching manual, which when I was the head coach of the Canadian team, I wanted something that kids in Eastern Canada could reference when I was at least talking with them. So, I basically just put down my current knowledge at the time. And I think you can still find online, there's some stuff on there. Hosted by some random sites. But that one, there's a few things. One, I actually did a bunch of endurance training right before competitions, which makes no sense in hindsight. But I didn't actually back down enough to strength training. And then I wrote some articles for, I think, Rock and Ice, maybe late 2000s. And that's where I reference a lot more of the dedicated strength training, which I think is more important, especially as you start getting a little older and the adaptations aren't coming as quickly. Or, as we were talking about, getting closer to your limit, you're not going to be able to just climb through your limit. You actually need to back away and figure out what your weaknesses are, target that, or take 6 to 8 weeks, just strength train so you actually come back stronger. If you just climb, your skin might be the thing failing. There could be a bunch of things that are going on that you aren't actually getting stronger.
Mm-hmm. There's kind of a recent push from a lot of coaches to try to integrate these like kind of minimal effective dose sort of programs. So you're doing a little bit of fingerboarding, you're also mixing in bouldering, you're also whatever, sport climbing or whatever. You're kind of doing a mix of things. And my understanding is the idea is that you're doing just enough of the training to slowly, incrementally get stronger over the long haul. But you're still climbing, you're still performing at a pretty high level, maybe not peaking. Have you ever tried something like that?
Yeah, and that's generally what you do when you're either in red point mode or like right now I don't have a specific goal with climbing. So that's kind of what I do now. It's just trying to like alternate even a week of hangboarding, then don't hangboard for a bit. Because the problem is if you back off like what I did with Necessary Evil, and I backed off completely and took roughly 6 months to ramp back up.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time like after the 6 to 8 week mark where I went out with friends to go climbing and I fell on routes that there's no way I would have fallen on. Like you drop down so much. It's actually kind of mentally taxing. You're like, I can't believe I'm this weak, but you're not weak. You're just not focused on climbing, and climbing is very specific. So, I put on some weight because I'm a bit of a mesomorph, and I walk out and haven't climbed in 6 weeks, and I weigh 10 pounds more than I normally do. Doesn't feel too good.
So remind me, you went into this in that conversation, but I think you did like 6 weeks of heavy fingerboarding, took 2 weeks off, maybe did another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're talking about like maybe an additional 3 or 4 months to really ramp back up to
correct
hard red pointing.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. Were you trying to maintain strength and doing like kind of maintenance workouts in that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I would still do hangboarding at least once a week.
Okay.
And I would try and target my hangboarding is kind of similar to basically I would alternate the time that I was hanging each week. So I would do 3-week cycles, and I would start with like 12 to 15 seconds. Then the second week I would do 8 to 12 seconds. Then the third week I'd do 5 to 8 seconds. So then during the red point phase and stuff like that, I would still try to target that 10 to 12 second hangs and see how my strength was feeling during that. But I wouldn't go back down to like the 5 to 8 second hangs. Though.
Okay.
That would be a little bit too, at the weight that I was doing would be too strenuous.
And to clarify, these are kind of max strength style, like you're doing one really hard hang and then waiting for 2 or 3 minutes to recover.
Yeah, I would do a bunch of different holds.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit counterintuitive, but for the shorter duration hangs, I would actually rest longer between the hangs.
Because they're more maximal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. One question I had specific to that, in that conversation with Neely, you said that I think on your, like a 1 pad edge, open 4 fingers, 2 hands, you had 180 pounds added to your body, or like 178 or something was the highest you got to.
Yeah.
And what do you weigh, like 140?
Yeah.
So
at the time I was probably like 148.
The question that was like screaming at me was, why not train one-handed?
I never did. And even now, I can't hang one-handed.
Kidding.
I just can't do it. I don't know what it is. Like, if you give me a hold
fascinating.
Less than a pad and a half, I can't hang it one-handed. I just never. I don't think it's a strength thing. I think it is a technique thing. My shoulder doesn't stabilize.
I was gonna say, is it like a scapular or like something in your shoulder?
That would be interesting because every so often I walk because I see guys like Alex Amigos doing plus 25 kilos.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, that looks ridiculous. Yeah. I should at least be able to hang one-handed.
I know. He's 50 pounds stronger than me per hand.
Yeah. And so I should be able to hang one hand because I can hang double my body weight off 2 hands. It just doesn't stabilize. Like I can't get that position underneath the and I haven't worked on it enough to like learn it, but maybe 2 years ago that was my goal, was to be able to hang on a 1 pad crimp one-handed. Just hang. Like not 1 arm pull-ups. I'm not talking like just to be able to hang it. I couldn't.
Did you have a way that you were trying to progress up to it?
No, just like at the midway through a boulder session when I felt warmed up, I'd walk over to the hangboard and
still can't
try
do
it
it
for 10 minutes. Yeah, I'd try it for like, try it. And I'd do even if I held a sling or something to stabilize me, I could do it no problem. But it was just that without any stabilization, I could just put my hand against a pole and I could hang one hand. But I can't get that position.
So there's some rotational
I don't
element,
know.
or
Yeah, and it could be muscle imbalance, and people listening to this will be like, "Well, you're an idiot. You should have stretched out your pec." I don't know. Who knows? But I couldn't do it.
that would have taken you to 515, man.
Who knows?
You have
Hey,
some
still
weakness in your
have a
shoulder.
chance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One other thing that popped out is that Necessary Evil is an incredibly crimpy route. It's really small holds. At least what makes it hard is the really bad holds. And you clearly, whatever you did worked really well for that. I think you said that you got so much stronger on the holds that you were able to change some of your beta and do longer pulls that were more efficient.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, you came to Smith, and I think you climbed Big R, To Bolt or Not to Be, and Chemical Ali in like a week or two.
Yeah.
All 14A, all hard, all super crimpy.
Yeah.
But I think you were just training heavy on the bigger holds, and then you said you were doing body weight full crimp just for the recruitment.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that?
So I think, I don't have a background in exercise physiology. My background is in talking with people and in, reading books, reading stuff. But I don't have an education, I guess, a formal education in exercise physiology. But to me, most stuff, like the difference between an open hand and a closed hand crimp, you're targeting the same muscle. So to me, that's just technique. It's just how are you recruiting those muscles? I understand that the force load on closed crimp is harder on the tendons, and you don't want to train that with the weight that I was doing. Like that would have blown my fingers up. But you still want to be able to recruit the muscles in the slightly shorter contraction. So that's why I would do, just at the end of my session, I would body weight only, 4 fingers, closed hand crimp, and just 10 seconds. Like I didn't alternate that. Like that was just...
Just a single? Or
Just to recruit. Yeah, just a single, just to recruit it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it clearly worked.
I mean, who knows? But like this is the thing. Just because the result was that it did Necessary Evil doesn't mean that there might not be a more effective way of doing it.
Sure. Yeah. That's what makes all this so hard, right? You'll never really know.
Well, like everybody's different. Everybody's bodies react differently. And same thing with like nutrition. Every 6 months, you might have a dialed nutrition, and then 6 months later it doesn't work for you. So you got to kind of constantly be experimenting with yourself with training. Like, okay, that worked really well, and then as soon as it doesn't, and that's hard to, you have to be really self-aware when something's no longer working, to mix it up somehow, or go heavier weights, or go lighter, or go volume, or I don't know, something.
Was that a small crimp that you were doing the recruitment hangs on?
Probably like a half pad, 3/4 pad. I mean, it wasn't tiny. It wasn't painful.
It was more about just teaching your brain the
just
position.
Close the crimp. Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you get stuck in the open hand. It's really easy to, like, in the past when I'd done big fingerboarding sessions, I could open hand and felt super strong, but as soon as I went to crimp, it felt uncomfortable. And so I didn't want to lose that discomfort or the comfortable feeling with a closed hand crimp.
Okay. And I remember you were doing the open 4, you were doing different pocket teams. Were you training a half crimp position as well?
No.
Okay.
I would do like slopers, and then all open hand stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Might not have been the most effective, but hey, it's what I had lined up for myself, and I stuck to it. So that's something, right? Like sticking to any training program is the hardest part.
Yeah, that might be the most important key, right? It's just pick something and do it.
Yeah.
And it might, I don't know. I've wasted a lot of brain power trying to nitpick to get the perfect program. And
and then you do it for 2 weeks, and you switch it up, and you do another thing for 2 weeks, because the reality is you got to pick something, like stick with it for 4 to 6 months and see what happens.
So I think at that time, I think you said that you couldn't do campusing or weighted pull-ups because of your elbows. You've had some long time tendinitis and things like that in your elbows. So you were doing lat pull downs.
Yeah.
Any other major exercises that you found helpful over the years or that have been kind of staples for you?
No, I mean, it's kind of funny because like now it's just, even with the focus on bouldering now, it's a little bit different. That's one thing I would say is that, like, I used to, back when I was competing, if I fell on a route because I was pumped, I always thought it was because I didn't have enough endurance. And so I used to train endurance like crazy, which is why now when I go to places like the Red or Maple Canyon, they're easy for me. But I never really did the power training, which is probably what I should have been doing, especially when I was like 16, 17, 18. That would have been great to do a lot more power training. But yeah, I basically assumed that if you got pumped, it meant because you weren't fit enough. Now I look at it a little bit differently. Now I look at it like, if you're strong enough that a crimp feels like a jug, you can rest. You can relax on a crimp. So it'd be better to just be stronger so that when you hit a bad hold, you can be more relaxed. So you're not, rather than operating at 80% of your max, you're only operating at like 40% on the same hold. You're going to be able to climb for longer. regardless of your endurance. Problem I see nowadays is a lot of boulders don't know how to recruit anything less than 100%. So
Yeah.
they go 100% for 10 moves and they're fine, and then they go 12 moves and they fall because they're pumped out of their brain. But if they learn how to climb at 20, 30, 40%, which
Just
is
learn
actually
how to
what I
relax.
think hangboarding teaches you really well, is how to just hold on just enough.
Interesting.
So you learn how to, because you're squeezing, but you're not, like if you're holding on for 15 seconds, you're not squeezing at 100% for 15 seconds. You're squeezing at, starts with like 20, 30, 40, and then your times will go up just as you learn how to hold. Your weights even will go up just as you learn to hold that position. And then eventually you actually start hitting the muscular adaptations.
That's super interesting.
That's my thought, at least. Doesn't mean it's right.
Do you do anything else to teach yourself how to relax or just improve your movement economy or climb more efficiently?
Like I said earlier, I think that is the one thing I learned from doing all the endurance training I did was
Okay.
how to move efficiently.
Okay.
Because of the fact that when you're exhausted, you still want to do the next move. You want to do the next move. You want to do the next move. So you learn how to like use your hips to generate momentum as opposed to your arms. You learn how to dead point a little bit more rather than lock off and reach. So there's things like that which I think have benefited me not on purpose. Like I didn't think about them. It wasn't a conscious decision at the time. But now, I move efficiently even when I'm fresh because that's how I climbed for so long, was tired.
Got you. Okay. So we were just in the climbing gym, and at the end of the session, we were on the Moonboard, and we were climbing with our buddy Patrick, and I think he was trying to work through this list of problems that he has. He's trying to get to a point where you can climb each one on like a 30-second timer or something. And I just threw out this comment like, I think if you could do that, like you'd probably feel really ready for your sport climbing around Vegas, Like, do you think that would transfer pretty well? And I just look at you and you just go, no.
Well, it's different, right? Because like when you say sport climbing around Vegas, that's also generalizing.
Sure.
So do you mean, would climbing on the Moonboard translate to Fall of Man at the VRG? No. Would it translate to climbing at Potosi? Yes.
Huh.
So to me, it was more the generalization of what sport climbing means than what the Moonboard. The Moonboard will teach you how to climb in that style. If you have to jump a lot, which is what he was doing, absolutely, that's a very useful technique. And that the recruitment and all that stuff and the power, very useful for that similar stuff. It's not going to help if you want to go climb on your feet and grab small holds and shift your hips very delicately.
Sure.
It won't. Every tool has its applications.
So going back to, I know you're dealing with an elbow injury right now and you're not able to train at your hardest, but going back to your comment about wishing that you'd spent more time on power, is that kind of how you're thinking about moving forward with your training? Are you spending more time on that when you can?
Well, the reality is also, as you get older, the ability to recruit quickly, which is power, does decrease. So that's also why I wish I'd worked on it more when I was younger. But I'm not really sure. I'm actually kind of at a little bit of a crossroads right now. I'm not, because there's also like, I've been climbing for 30 plus years, been pushing myself hard for 20, 25 of those. There's little things like I've got I don't know that it's arthritis, but like my fingers are starting to hurt more than they ever did. So I need to, once this elbow is sorted out, I need to like back off and see. Like I still do want to climb hard. I just don't know what that means. I would love to have the time to back away and train for something and hopefully do 5:15. Like that would be an absolute dream. Right now I'd be happy to do another 14C.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know.
Got you. So you just recently posted on Facebook sharing this article where you were interviewed. I think it was Clipping Chains. It was an article called Mike Doyle, A Remote-Controlled Climbing Life. And your post was basically, I don't want to read into it too much because it was just written on the internet, but it seemed a little bit of a frustration vent, like, hey, all of you people that think I just get to go climbing all the time and have this amazing flexibility and this amazing life, I actually work my ass off and I've earned every bit of this. I remember you spent some time climbing at Horn Lake years ago, and you have a route called ADATO. I kind of thought we could start with that. So tell me about ADATO and your remote-controlled climbing life a little bit.
Yeah, so I also want to preface this all with a lot of people do say, it's amazing that you can climb hard even though you have a full-time job. Everybody's got distractions in their life. Everyone has something going on that prevents them from push themselves at their limit in whatever activity they're doing. It might be other activities. Maybe some people don't want to climb hard only. Some people have families. Some people have taken care of their parents. Some people have whatever, My main distraction from climbing is my work. But I happen to also be so focused on climbing and work that's like pretty much sums up my life. But the whole working remotely thing, I started in computer science in university because at the time it was pretty common to get a job, be there for 2 years, move somewhere else, be there for 2 years, move somewhere else. So I had these dreams of, living in Barcelona for 2 years, and then living in southern France for 2 years, and living in, and using my job to travel. And that's always kind of been in the back of my mind. And then when I started in Vancouver working for a startup right out of university, we were working long hours, but I slowly, gained the confidence of the coworkers and stuff like that I could take off, and they knew I would get my job done. Like, hey, I know this has to be done on Monday. I'm taking off Thursday night. It'll be done by Monday. Don't worry about it. So you have to earn that respect. You have to be like, if something's important, it has to be done by Monday. People don't want to see you not in the office. And so ADATO came around so ADATO stands for another day at the office. Because I used to, take the ferry to Vancouver Island on Friday morning, and I'd work a few hours on the ferry, and then I would climb Friday, and then work Friday evening from a coffee shop or something like that. And then I'd work a little bit Saturday morning before climb Saturday, and then usually I try to go over to Tofino and go surfing Saturday evening.
Oh, nice.
Surf all day Sunday, and then come back. And I've had a long-standing rule with where I work that there's no meetings Monday mornings.
Okay.
Like, don't expect to see me before noon on a Monday, because I don't know what my weekend entails. I may not sleep at all.
Okay.
So Monday is my sleeping day. I don't want to set an alarm. I don't want to, that's kind of been like, when I got hired by a company in Colorado that I didn't know anyone there. It was like standard, send a resume in, do an interview, get hired. On my first day, I told my boss that. And he was just like, who are you? You can't make those demands. I'm like, no, that's my rule. Like, no meetings before 11, So yeah, that's been a long-standing thing. So that's kind of, I'd say, the first way it started. And then slowly stuff like, well, I want to go to Europe for 4 weeks, but I've only got 2 weeks of paid vacation. So I'm only going to work 20 hours a week and extend it off. And same thing, having that communication and trust with your coworkers that you're not just slacking, And then I actually moved to Seattle, and the company I was working for incorporated in the US and hired me on a work visa in Seattle. So then, and that was the first time I truly worked remotely, and I haven't looked back. And that was, 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah. Right on. You still work a lot though.
Yeah, it's not a good thing.
Is that you? I'm curious. Is that you? Can you not help yourself, or do you work for a company that's what the demand is?
I definitely, like when I was working for the company based out of Colorado, I wasn't working as much as I am now. And even when I started at this company, I wasn't working as much as I am now. Right now, we're at a very interesting point in the company. It's still, I want to call it a startup, even though I've been there for 8 years. We're at an interesting point where it could be, I keep saying this, I've been saying this for the last few years, but it could be successful, like, around the corner. But right now we've got a lot of demands from customers and a lot of demands from technology that we're trying to adapt to and learn. So you've got schedules where you're like, okay, I need to learn this technology, but then everything's getting interrupted by customers' demands as well. And like the past 2 weeks has been incredibly ridiculous. Like, even it's a Saturday afternoon right now, it's raining in Las Vegas. Thursday night at 11 o'clock at night, just as I was getting ready to shut down my computer, I got an email from a company in Germany, and there was a problem. And so they were getting ready to release on the Friday, and we had sent them stuff 6 to 8 months ago. So I had to work all night Thursday night to figure out, first of all, if the problem was our fault or if it was something they were doing wrong. Turns out it was our fault, which as soon as that happens, I ramp up my effort level. Managed to get them a fix at like 5:30 in the morning, but they're 8 or 9 hours ahead. So, they still had a few hours to deliver their stuff. Then I had a meeting with a different company at 7 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had a different meeting at like 11. And so it basically was up all day Friday. Yeah. And then another issue came in at like Friday at, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's just, stuff's happening. And I mean, yeah, like it's easy to say, oh, just tell your boss to, fuck off or whatever. But it's a startup. It's people I've known for a long time. We all work hard. It's not like just 1 or 2 people and then a bunch of slackers. And yeah, it's basically like stuff's got to get done. It's hard for me also just to step away from my job. The stuff I'm working on right now is very complicated. So it's hard to just step away when your mind's still churning. And it's actually that, I think, more than anything in the last few years has affected my climbing more than, I can't walk up to the crag and be like, okay, I'm ready to try hard. My mind's exhausted. I'm burned out. So like, even if I turn on my computer at all in the morning, my mind's on work, even on a Saturday or something like that. So I really have to try and not force myself, but just not think about it. Like, don't turn on the computer in the morning. Just wake up have my oatmeal and peanut butter, banana, coffee, and watch some hockey highlights or something like that. And then like slowly start stretching and working your way to going climbing. And then I can have a really good day. But if I just like step off from work and go climbing, it's usually not a good day.
Got you. Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. Is there anything else that you've done to create boundaries for yourself?
Yeah, there is little things. Like I will book vacation times and stuff like that.
Okay.
But generally, if something needs to be done, I'd rather just get it done. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of lame, but like work is more important right now than climbing. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. It seems like that's evolved. So at first you went down this career path, it sounds like, so that, because you had this dream of being able to spend 2 years in Barcelona and bounce around. Has that changed?
Yeah, but even back then, I would spend 40, 68 hours a week working, and then climbing was kind of always this like on the side fun thing. Even when I was in the early 2000s competing and redpointing and trying to do stuff, it was still like if something came up like that competition in Mexico that I went to, like it would have been great if I didn't have that project the week before, but it did. And that's, that was more important. And maybe it's a little bit of like, don't want to let down coworkers. I'm not sure, but it's definitely like if something has to be done, I just want to get it done. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this question will work or if it'll make sense, but is there a point at which you'd be bummed? Like if this kept going on for another 5 years, you're working 60 plus hours a week. You must like it to some extent to still be doing it. You must care about it and find some purpose in it or something. But I imagine that it's not ideal. So how are you thinking about that?
I try not to. No, I mean, this isn't a new discussion or new topic of conversation or new point of view. Yeah. I mean, like in 2015, I told myself I'd give it 2 years. Okay. Because I was already pushing too hard and it was just exhausting. And it's unfortunately like 2017 when that cutoff came, it was like some stuff had happened. I learned some different things, but now I'm in. Like I'm kind of ride or die with this company. It could fail tomorrow. That's definitely a possibility, or it could be successful. And that's, but what I'm looking at now is not necessarily, it's not going to be the sell for $1 billion and I get to ride off into the sunset. Like that's never going to happen. That was never even the dream. What I do want is to have a little more flexibility in my project timelines, not necessarily work hours, but like work hard for 6 months and then be able to take 3 months off. And so I'm kind of trying to get towards that, like even in discussions with my company about a 4-day work week even, which I would work 5 days a week, 6-7 days a week, but then be able to take a month with no work and go to Europe or something like that. Because right now, even though in theory I could work from Europe, I'd have to take a bunch of devices when I work. Yeah,
you have a really elaborate setup.
Yeah, and so it's like really hard to travel with that. Like even working remotely as I do now, it's kind of stressful moving between places if I don't know what my setup will be like when I get there. Yeah. And so it's like, it's nice to be somewhere for a month, 2 months, something like that, and get settled and set up and know what that's like. As opposed to being like, going somewhere for 10 days and then somewhere else for 10 days. Like that doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm.
I think in that article you had written, and again, I'll link to it in the show notes, you had said that since April 2018, you've been, in quotes, extra remotely. What does that look like? I know you came out to Smith for a long time,
exactly,
a month
like
or longer.
2 months in Smith. So the winter of 2017, 2018, I mean, I'm pretty honest with this. I was depressed for sure. I wasn't even leaving the house. I was working so much. The weather wasn't great that winter, but it didn't matter. Like the climbing that around Vegas that inspires me, I'd done most of it. And I don't have time to do the long routes that are also really inspiring. And bouldering has never really been a passion of mine. So like, while there's a lot of new bouldering around here and there's a lot of stuff, that's not enough to like make me want to leave the house. I know it sounds lame, but so basically I was just working nonstop, wasn't leaving the house. And I realized I had to make a change. And the traveling a little bit more, I'd lived in Vegas at that point for 8 years nonstop. And Vegas is awesome. I absolutely love it. Love the people here. Love the community. Love the climbing. But after 8 years, I needed something different. I needed to, I wasn't climbing as well as I used to. So the projects I've left are all 14 pluses that aren't necessarily fun. Like some stuff up Charleston, like mono dynos and stuff like that. You've got to kind of suffer to do them. Yeah. But I knew there was things like, I could go to Smith Rock, and I have really, really good friends there. I've climbed there a bunch. It's like a second home for me. Mm-hmm. So I went up there, set up shop for like 2 months, had a great time. And then I went up into Canada and went up and spent like 2 months in the Canadian Rockies and had a great time there. And then went to the Red River Gorge for 2 months, and basically moving between places where the climbing's there, but it's not the focus. The focus is more hey, like I haven't seen people in a while. You're good friends. Like drag me out, you know?
Okay.
And I said that like to a lot of people. I'm like, look, drag me out at 3:00 in the afternoon. Like grab me physically and like drag me out because like I need to get out and do something.
Yeah.
And then I come back at 10:00 at night and work until 3 a.m. But don't tell them that. But yeah, it's basically like I just need to change the scenery, and it's been good. It's also been interesting, and I've learned some things that work and some things that don't. I'm kind of still constantly reflecting on what should I do next, and what's worked, and that's helping to kind of define how I want to move forward.
Do you have any practical things that help you with your productivity when you're transitioning to a new physical workspace?
No, I mean, there's a few routines I have. Like I want to make sure I can have, my coffee in the morning.
Okay.
And then there's some things I look for, which is like, I want the climbing to be pretty close. I don't want to waste time midweek when coworkers are communicating, stuff like that. I don't want to waste time traveling or commuting to the climbing. And because it turns a 4-hour day into a 6-7 hour day. I like to be able to run right out of my house or right out of my accommodations. I don't want to have to commute to run. I don't enjoy running enough to drive somewhere to run. Yeah, just little things like that.
Okay. You had mentioned your keyboard, I think because of your climbing forearms and elbows and stuff like that. Do you have a recommendation for a specific brand or style of keyboard?
Well, I've had a Kinesis is the brand of it.
Okay.
And it's the best description would be like you're typing in two concave surfaces, and the keys are adjusted for the length of your fingers. It's generic, but it's like the pinky keys are smaller and closer together than like the middle finger keys. And you've got, I think, 6 buttons for each thumb, like space bar, backspace, page up, page down, that kind of stuff. So you never have to move your wrists at all. Like my wrists are stable and they're supported.
Whoa.
Whereas like typing on a laptop, the back of my forearm seize up. I mean, even now, like I've been using this keyboard since 2002. And even now, if I tried to type on a laptop for half a day, my forearms would seize up. And so I'm sure there's lots of stuff you could do about it. I'd rather just get a keyboard.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll find that and link to it in the show notes. You said Kinesis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know if the company still exists. I hope they do. I mean, like I said, I've had this keyboard for almost 20 years.
Okay.
And it looks like it looks disgusting.
If nothing else, I'll find one that's similar. What about a mouse? Anything in particular?
No, I switched a long time ago to my non-dominant hand, so I moved to my left hand for mousing. But
why is that?
My wrist was starting to bother me on the right hand, so I just moved to my non-dominant hand, and I haven't had an issue since.
How long did it take you to adjust to that?
A couple games of Minesweeper. I don't know how many. A little bit, But.
Is that offhand mouse training?
Yeah,
Minesweeper?
Exactly.
Nice. That's cool. So one thing we just kind of brushed over, you were up in the Canadian Rockies, but you recently repeated the Canadian Rockies Alpine Trilogy. Yeah,
I did that summer of 2018.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's 3 routes. They're all multi-pitch routes, big routes that are 14A. Warhammer, 14A, 15 pitches. The Shining Uncut, 12 pitches. Blue Jeans Direct, 6 pitches. Tell me about that.
So Sonny Trotter had this vision to try and bring like the European, I think it's one in Switzerland, one in Austria, one in France, something like that, the Alps trilogy to North America. And he hiked around and did a bunch of scouting, and he had put up The Shining with Tommy Caldwell years ago. And there's a funny video of them taking a lawn chair up the wall if you ever want to see that. And then he did...
I'll link to it.
Castles in the Sky, and there's actually a good video for that one too. And then there was another route called Blue Jeans, and what he did was variations on those 3 to create 3 hard multi-pitch routes. So going to the Canadian Rockies, that was in the back of my mind that I would have liked to have done them. And I don't want to sound arrogant, but
you're going to call them soft.
No, I knew that I could do 514 not being in shape.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not trying to but even if I wasn't in shape, I can go do 514, and these seemed like I could do 14A, like I can't do, but it seemed like a fun objective, in the mountains, work the routes. It might take me days and days and days of hiking back and forth, but I knew that I could do them, as opposed to like going to the Rockies and be like, I want to do 14C, and then maybe not having the ability or not having the mental capacity or something like that. But I didn't know if I would be able to logistically have the time to go do these routes. So in the back of my mind, that was already there, and I'd already knew I was going to the Rockies. And then Sasha Zulian reached out. She's like, "Hey, I'm looking for a partner for these routes. I want to go do them.
Cool.
Would you want to?" And I've known her for many years, and I told her straight up, like, "No, like I'm not the right guy for you. Like I might bail on you the day before if work comes up. I'm only a weekend warrior. Like you definitely want to try and meet other people. And there's a strong community of climbers there. Like you won't have a problem finding people. And then some stuff went down with her. She had a partner lined up and like some drama. She was basically scrambling. She already had some videographers lined up to come film her on this one route, and she wanted to go up with someone that she knew, basically. And I initially was like, no, because I'm already going climbing with this other person the next day on the same route, and they're massive approaches. I didn't want to go back and forth. Finally, I was like, yeah, let's go. Like, I want to help you. Let's go. And I had so much fun. Like, it was just, the one we were on was Castles in the Sky, Warhammer. And it was just perfect weather. The route itself is shockingly spectacular. I put it up as one of my top routes of all time. Like, one of my top climbing experiences of all time. Because it's this overhanging arête. Like, Warhammer is 4 pitches of 511 to this ledge, and then you launch into like 2 pitches of 510, and then a long pitch of 514 to, I think it's a 512, 510, 511, and then we don't have to, but then we did Eisenhower Tower at the top, which is 8-9 pitches of 5.8. We just free soloed it.
Oh, sick.
But Castles in the Sky, you come across this ledge, so you skip that first 4 pitches, and you walk across this ledge, but
got it.
You start on the small ledge, you're already 400 feet in the air, and then you do 2 pitches, so now you're 6 pitches in the air, 600 feet in the air, and you start up this wildly overhanging arête.
The 14A pitch?
The 14A pitch.
Yeah.
And you actually have to pull a roof, 700 feet in the air or something like that. And I just remember being like scared out of my mind. Like, it was just super exposed. And I had just come off doing Spank the Monkey and East Face and Smith. I thought my mental game was pretty strong.
Yeah.
And that first day I was so wigged out. Like, I couldn't relax. I was so scared. And it's closely bolted. I mean, Sonny bolted it so that even if you're not a 514 climber, you could second it.
Oh, cool.
So you can actually pull between the draws, or at least you only have to do 1 or 2 moves between draws, because it's steep. If you're seconding, it's actually, you want protection to be pretty close.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't scary in terms of runouts or nothing like that. It was just the exposure and the setting and the scene was so wild that, yeah, I kind of got, I really enjoyed it, and then had a great time out there with Sunny and Sasha. And I remember telling her, like, that day, I'm like, hey, like, I want right of first refusal. Like, hit me up if you're going out. I will let my company know. I actually emailed my boss, like, that night. I was like, hey, like, if there's something that I want to do this summer, it's important to me. I might give you guys 24 hours notice, and I might not be at work, And again, I've earned their respect enough that they're like, yeah, absolutely, go for it.
Yeah. Right of first refusal. I like that.
Right of first refusal.
I've never heard that before. I like that.
So I went back the next day with Sam Tucker, and he was working that route and didn't do it. And then Sasha went back that week a few times with some other partners. And then we went back on the Saturday and we did the full Warhammer.
Awesome.
So it was like, yeah, and then after that...
Was that in a film I could find somewhere?
Sasha just released, I don't know if it's available yet publicly, but she's been doing a bit of a tour with it.
Okay.
And there's some footage, I think, on the Red Bull site, but it's like unscripted, just some raw footage.
Okay.
But I think she will be touring it, or at least making it available at some point. But the focus is on her, and she definitely went through some stuff that summer that, injuries and dealing with weather and stuff. So she had her own challenges, but she, like... when she turns it on, she goes. Like, it's so impressive,
Oh, cool.
Like, the routes aren't that physically difficult for her, but some of the challenges of, like, with her injury and stuff like that, like, she just, when she turns it on, she goes. It's so impressive.
Cool.
But yeah, so then the next one we did was The Shining. We went right to it, like The Shining uncut, I guess. We went right to that one. Like, I think we did Warhammer on a Friday, and we actually were on The Shining on Sunday,
You and Sasha?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just worked out the sequences. Didn't get back until probably like 10 at night or something ridiculous, because that one's like a 5-hour approach to the base of the climb.
Oh, wow. Are all these similar in that there's like a 14A pitch, and then or are any of them more sustained where they have a lot more harder pitches? Yeah,
and they're also very different in terms of climbing style.
Oh, interesting.
But so I had been on The Shining with Josh Wharton the year before. We went out, we were there for a slideshow thing. And we went out to just get on The Shining. We only did the crux pitch, which is, so you have to hike in, with Josh Wharton, it was like 25 minutes, but it's like 2 hours in, and then you have to scramble up this like gully where I think there's like one pitch of maybe 5.9, 10A that is actually bolted, but that's like 1,000 foot of elevation, maybe 14 pitches or something like that. I can't remember what
Oh, wow.
You don't really call them, it's just scrambling, but when you wrap, I think it's 12 to 14 pitches down the gully.
Oh my gosh.
And then it's like dead vertical, like really, really fun, crimp, technical climbing. So that's what I thought all the routes were like. So when I walked up to Castles in the Sky and it's this wildly overhanging.
Got you.
I remember just being like, we're going up there? Like, what? Why are we doing that? I thought we were going to climb. Like, I had stiff shoes, like just whatever. But so Castle in the Sky is like one pitch of 514, mostly much, much easier, I think, than one pitch of 512A and then 511. The Shining itself is 12C, 12D, 13C, 12B, 12C, 11D, 10C, something like that.
Okay.
But the Shining Uncut, because the first 3 pitches are all at hanging belays, just links those 3 pitches.
Got it.
So then it becomes 14A. It's an 80 or 45 meter pitch or something like that.
Yeah.
No, 80 meter pitch. Yeah. We had to stretch to 80.
You had to stretch an 80.
Yeah. I actually took the knot out of the end of the rope to allow Sasha to clip the anchor.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's huge.
Did she trail a second rope?
At that one, we actually had a fixed line up.
Oh, okay.
And then because you can rappel, there's intermediate anchors, right? Because you can link 3 pitches.
Yeah.
So you can rappel yourself down.
Okay.
If you need to. But then Blue Jeans I'd say it's the most sustained. It's physically the hardest, but it's also the easiest to get to. It's only a 45-minute, 1-hour hike, something like that. But that one's like 12B, pretty physical, to a long, really fun 12D, to a really physical 12D, and then a pitch that they call 13A, but it's more like 13B, I don't know, maybe even 13C. It's really hard to the 14A pitch.
Okay.
So
wow. Yeah.
that one's a little more stacked, but you can also be at the 14A pitch like 3 hours from the car, Whereas the other one, you're still hiking 3 hours from the car.
Yeah.
So I actually did the Blue Jeans direct after a day of work. Like I left my left my house or left my office at like 2 and did it and then got back and had some beers.
Nice.
But the other ones were full days. Like leave at 4 a.m., hike in, hike out.
What was the timeline that you did all 3 of them in? Was this just over the course of a summer up there?
Over the course of summer. And then dealing with weather and stuff like that. I think for me, it was 3 days on Moorhammer, 2 days on the Shining, and then another 2 days to do the Shining Uncut. So 4 days. And then 3 days on Blue Jeans Direct. But one of them, sorry, Ed, my buddy came out and he ruptured his bicep following me.
Oh.
So we had to, I didn't get to the crux pitch that day.
Oh, man. That's brutal.
Yeah.
How's the rock quality on those?
It's the Rockies. No, the crux pitches are all good. It's all the other stuff in between. Like, I think Sasha alludes to in her video. I have seen it. Yeah, there's some sections of cobbled together mud for sure.
Wow.
The Rockies, a very high altitude. It's actually not high altitude. It's just the freeze thaw up there is fairly significant. So the rock itself is on those things there's some sections of you got to know what you're doing. For instance, like when we did Eisenhower Tower, we're free soloing, I don't know, several thousand feet up or whatever, and you're grabbing all these bricks, but you're like, I really hope that like you just had to be cautious. Like it was easy 5.8, but you just had to be slow and move much slower than honestly we moved slower than I would have expected. So the timing was a little bit tricky, but we also didn't go up the easy way up Eisenhower, which we should have. I don't know. We were just basically cruising. Yeah. Having fun.
Yeah, cool. Got you. Were you mixing in other days while you were working on these 3 routes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would still climb it. Like there was a crag near where I was staying called Planet X, and there's so much good cragging around the Bow Valley and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely... And you couldn't... Like, they're massive days. Like, even just the hiking was so exhausting, you wouldn't want to go back multiple times.
Got it.
So you'd take like kind of 2-3 days off minimum in between sessions or in between days. And in those days, I'd go out and hang out with friends and maybe not try to push it. But I think I did a couple 514s that summer outside of the Trilogy. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Is there anything else up there that you're psyched to go back for?
I'm going back again this summer. So I went back. So that was 2018. I went back 2019 for the whole summer, and a really good setup up there. Lots of good friends. It's gorgeous. I'm going back again this summer. I don't know how my elbow will heal up, so I'm not really setting any climbing goals. But I mean, it's also just so much fun. And I enjoy kind of long fitness days in the mountains. So I want to go and just do some like big days in the. And it's not necessarily like mountaineering, but like scrambling and stuff like that. It'd be fun.
Cool. So I actually want to bounce back to Necessary Evil a little bit. I know it's old news. It's 5 years ago that you did this now, and you're probably tired of hearing about it. But there's a really great video that came out of that, and it's an athlete spotlight on you. I think it was put out by Sportiva, filmed by Joe Kinder.
Yeah.
And
Joe did a great job.
He did a really great job. It's an amazing video. I'll link to it. It's called Necessary Diligence.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, but the core theme that kind of keeps coming up in that video is that you chose this route because you really wanted something that would challenge you.
Yeah.
And I have a quote from you in that video. You said, "I wanted a challenge this winter that would make me have to become a better rock climber, have to train, have to focus, have to change my lifestyle a little bit, get back in shape, lose weight, something that would bring all of that together." How was that experience overall? Was that something that you enjoyed?
Yeah. And this is something that, you learn over the years to be a little bit more, grateful, that kind of stuff. But the community really rallied, and it wasn't just one person. It was like many people that I had many people reaching out being like, "Hey, if you need a belay ever, let me know. I'll come out and belay you." People that had no interest in actually rock climbing at the VRG. They just wanted to come and belay. And then there was also other friends that would pick projects out there just to be able to come out and have a reason to be there. Mm-hmm. The VRG is not necessarily the most pleasant place to hang out.
Right. You're right above the highway.
Right above the freeway. But it's the climbing's amazing for sure. But yeah, it was nice to dedicate myself to something that was so hard for me. And that always, I think, kind of going back to the competition climbing, entering a competition 6 months, 8 months in advance gave me a reason to train and focus on something. Outdoor climbing has always been definitely my passion, but it's always there, And then road trips, I actually haven't, especially when I was living in Vancouver, I didn't actually travel that much. And that's something that, again, looking back, is because all my spare time I was actually coaching. So I didn't travel for myself for many years. Picking something like Necessary Evil that I knew would challenge me, above and beyond. I had already climbed many of the routes around Vegas in terms of the stuff up at Potosi and Clark Mountain and the Cathedral and all those routes. And they were awesome, loved them. But they were all kind of 2-3 week projects, maybe a month. But this one I knew was going to be big. And actually, I expected it to do it the first winter. I expected to do it in 2014. And at the end of that season, I was actually shocked I hadn't done it.
Oh, really?
And part of me was a little upset because I was falling, one-hanging it casually. But yeah, I was kind of surprised I hadn't done it. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm coming back again. And even I was like, do I want to? Do I really want to come back again?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to if I hadn't done it in 2015, I'm not sure that I would, I don't know. I probably would have because I'm stubborn, but I don't know. It's not easy to fail at something when you try that hard, and then go back for it. So I don't know. I'm glad I did it because then I didn't have to go back.
I know this question might not make the most sense because you are dealing with this elbow thing. You spoke to this earlier. You don't know what's next for you, but do you crave that sort of thing? Do you hope to find that focusing project again? I guess, do you enjoy living that way where you have something that's focusing your diet and all these
No.
other... Okay.
Right now, with my work being the way it is, climbing has to be a little bit of that escape that I was talking to you about earlier. If I take climbing too seriously right now, it's not a good thing. So even when I was up in Smith Rock last year, it was fun to just cruise around and do the obscure tour, I think I was calling it, routes that had 0 stars in the book.
I got a kick out of that.
Yeah, Peep Show was the highlight of the trip for sure. Anyone that's going to Smith Rock, there's a 12A-B thing. I don't even know what's rated. It's called Peep Show. It's phenomenal. Has no chalk on it. Just go do it.
40 plus meters of slab crimping.
Amazing. Yeah. So right now I'm glad I don't really want to project anything too hard because it's just takes so much mental energy to try 100%, to go to the crag, focus on and then fall and fail because that's the vast majority of what I do is just fail. So it's more fun to go out and just cruise and try to onsight or do routes second, third try, that kind of stuff. And for me, really, it is right now. It is going out with friends that I want to go hang out with, and it doesn't really matter that much where I go. I want a physical challenge, but as long as there's something there, but. I'm happy. Honestly, it's more fun for me now to go out and support people and be the asshole at the crag, telling them what they're doing wrong, and that's called support, by the way. And I'm having a lot more fun lately when I go out climbing. It's much more fun for me to see other people succeed than my own, for sure.
Cool. So you obviously sent the route. Do you think that process made you better?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, even you mentioned earlier, I went up to Smith Rocks.
Yeah, you smashed it.
Well, and I'd been on something like the Big R quite a bit before.
Oh, okay.
And I went and did it third try that spring.
Oh, wow.
I was that much better.
Yeah. Do you think it's stuck with you like in a lasting way? Do you think that experience had a lasting positive effect on your climbing?
Beyond the physical adaptations?
Beyond like crushing that season?
Yeah, I would say so. There's also like the takeaways are, you can push it. But I mean, honestly, like I said, the thing I walked away from that season that I will remember and cherish is just how many people came out to belay and support and cheer. And then not just that, like I'd put up a post, like it kind of became a bit of a joke how long I was trying it and how much I was trying it. But like the first time I linked through, there's 3 boulder problems on it. And the first time I linked through the bottom 2 and I fell at the red point crux, I remember being super excited and texting some friends in Vegas and being like, hey, I linked the 2 boulder problems, super psyched. And they're like, rad. And then like the next day I linked it twice in a day up to that move. So like number 2 and 3. And then it was like, felt the red point crux 3 times. Oh, felt the red point crux 5. And I think ended up falling at the red point crux 58 times. Or there was a number.
I have it written down and yes, it's 58.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Of course I remember that. But I have people like, I'd be like, yep, 36 times. And people are like, don't worry about it, man. You got it. Like friends from Europe, friends from Australia being like, yeah, man, don't worry. You got to stick with it. Still cheering for you. And I didn't feel pressure to do it, outside pressure to do it, but I did definitely feel the support. And I'm never going to forget that.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I mean, that's the story that I think is most inspiring to all of us, right? Like when we see someone doing all the things, having to train, having to focus, having to change your lifestyle, when we see someone doing that and giving their all to something, whether or not they pull it off or not, that's just always a really neat and inspiring thing to see. So
yeah, like even the video that Joe put together, I mean, both him and I were hoping that I would do it that season. It would make the video a little, you always want that little send at the end. But the fact that I didn't send that year and then he released the video.
Right.
So I don't send in that.
That's right. Yeah.
In that video. And it's actually kind of funny because looking at it now, I actually like that part of it.
Yes. I think it's a better video.
Yeah.
For that.
So it's like, no, like I'm augured in here. I'm going to keep working, And it was kind of a funny little, not the twist that I would have wanted, but yeah.
That's awesome. At the end of that, you said, you were talking about whether or not you were going to walk away from the thing if you didn't send. And you said, I don't think I've ever walked away from a route before.
Yeah.
I found that fascinating. What did you mean by that? Like literally, like you had never left unfinished business, or
no? Like it was actually, I think Joe got mad at me because I said that line a few different ways, and as he's interviewing me and as I'm trying to kind of say the dialogue, part of me was like, I didn't want to put pressure on myself. At the same time, I wanted to do it. At the same time, I don't want to like have to do it. Am I okay walking? And all these things are going through my mind as I'm answering this question. And he's kind of like there's different versions of that ending actually because of the fact that I say the same thing different ways, and then all of a sudden I contradict myself, and like part of me's like, yeah, I don't really care that much, but I want to fucking do it. And then like I really hope I do it, but at the same time it's okay, like because I hadn't done it yet, right? So I was fighting with those emotions in the moment because he asked me like something pretty similar, like, hey, he's like, do you really want to do it, or how are you going to feel if you don't do it? And so I'm kind of just rambling, and I never really processed that thought before, so I didn't really know how to answer it. And so I don't have a lot of unfinished business out there. There's a few routes, but to that point I'm not sure that there was. I think I'd done almost everything that I'd project.
Wow. That's amazing.
Like even in Smith, Just Do It, I wish I had done that year when I was feeling good, but I took it too lightly.
I was going to ask you about that one.
Yeah.
It's still on the list?
It's still on the list. It's just such an iconic route.
Yeah.
I mean, Smith Rock was the first place I road tripped to.
Oh, cool.
I remember walking up, looking at the route when I couldn't even climb 512 and just being inspired by it. In fact, in my high school yearbook, there's like a buddy of mine that I climbed with a bunch, drew a little thing being like, 514C, just do it. We're going to get there one day. And so
no kidding.
Part of me's like, I still got to get there, But it's still on the list. It's spectacular. And it's like, I truly enjoy rock climbing on it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I was hoping to do it this year. Just that's not going to happen. It's on the list.
Cool.
Yeah. A few things around here around Vegas that I haven't done that I've put significant time into. I'm not sure they're fun enough to go back to, but we'll see.
Got you.
And I'm not really too sure. I don't normally project on the road. I prefer to onsight. So that's one reason why I don't really have that much unfinished business.
Okay. Tell me about that. So if you don't get an onsight, do you make sure you get the red point, or do you just move on?
Depends on the route.
Okay.
If it was worth getting on a second time, or if it was like a hold broken ready to anchor, I'm not going to get on it a second time.
Okay.
But yeah, generally, if the onsight was like, felt casual and I just screwed something up, maybe not, maybe I'll wait, do it at the end of the day, another day if I'm in the same area. But It just depends on the route.
Do you have anything specific that you're thinking about when you're going for an onsight? As far as preparing, any way that you're looking for clues from the ground?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can, get as much information as possible by looking at it. Stuff like if there's a hole that has a bunch of chalk on it, chances are it's a rest. So you can kind of gun for that. Make sure that if there's an obvious hole that you're like, you look up there and there's like one pocket and it's way out right. You're like, okay, I got to get that with my right hand. So make sure that you setting up for that. But generally, I try to also just like onsighting is much different than red pointing because you don't know when the next rest is I think the biggest challenge. So when you get to rest, just make sure that you get as much recovery as you can and then punch forward from there. The worst thing, and it's definitely caught me a few times, is when you're like, the grade of the route and you're like, oh, it's 13A, so you're like, you're off the ground, maybe you screwed up the beta, or maybe it's just a really hard route. Be like, oh man, I've already done 13A, like it's got to be casual.
I've already earned it.
Yeah, I've already earned the 13A grade. And then also you're climbing, you're like, oh my God, I'm still working here. Like,
totally.
Yeah, it's such a funny thing. Also, you get to the anchors and the crux is right at the anchors. You're like, what the hell? Yeah. So I try not to think about the grade too much, but at the same time, you don't want to. And I understand that some people actually say if you know the grade, it's not even onsighting. But whatever.
Sure, that's almost impossible these days.
Yeah, or if you have bolts and chalk, it's not whatever. But like, try to if I'm going on like 12A onsight and I'm warming up, make sure I'm not climbing 513. Then you're just being dumb. But on harder routes, you kind of just want to get through. Who cares if it's like just get through the sequence? Like, doesn't matter if you screw it up. Just get to the next rest and recover.
Okay.
So tend to just kind of like, if I can do the move, I do the move. And just keep moving.
Even if you're making it harder.
Even if I'm making it hard, unless you can obviously back off. If you're committed to a sequence, just commit. Like you're going.
Yeah. Cool. So in that video, Necessary Diligence, you're wearing Testarossas. I think at Smith, I've seen you wear those and maybe the Mura Velcros. Do you have a favorite climbing shoe or different go-to shoes for different areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's more the different go-to shoes for different areas.
Yeah.
The one shoe that's really worked its way into my arsenal is the Genius.
Okay. Interesting.
Even though it's no edge technology, I actually wear the Genius on Just Do It.
No kidding.
Yeah. It makes the bottom so Just Do It has like a 13D first pitch and then links into roughly, or 13D, 14A, depending on.
It's like dead vertical, really thin.
Dead vertical,
technical.
super thin, and then links to the steep red rock up there. That's kind of like maybe 14B in its own right, or 14A in its own right. But it makes the upper part easier to wear these soft shoes. But it makes the lower part harder.
I imagine it does, yeah.
So it's kind of like a trade-off. But the Genius, like I didn't like the no edge technology when it first came out.
So this is a La Sportiva lace-up version of the no edge. So it's a rounded edge instead of a...
Yeah. So it's designed to smear. But climbing up at Mount Charleston, up at the hood, it's all porcelain, like really horrible feet. And I'd kind of like had tried them a little bit, but wasn't really super psyched on them. And the way I judge a shoe and make a choice is like, how many moves does it make easier and how many moves does it make harder, standard kind of stuff. And I was wearing the Solutions up on this route. It's Hasta La Vista, kind of pocket, really bad feet, hard boulder problems. And the Solutions were fine, but I'm going to try the Genius. There's this one traverse section where you're just smearing on porcelain and it shouldn't be that hard, but it was always just insecure. So then I tried the Genius and it made like 35 moves easier of 62 moves or whatever it is. Yeah, and only 3 moves harder, if I remember right. I actually thought about it. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so then they've become my kind of go-to onsighting shoe.
Yeah.
Because they work really, really well on everything except if you have to lift your heel and truly, truly edge. But if you can just smear or bring your feet high, they're amazing. And they just stick to anything. So if I'm onsighting and I don't know what's coming up, they're kind of like the shoe that I want to wear.
You don't have to be as precise with them.
You have to be precise, but they'll stick to stuff where if you hit a hold and you just need your foot over to the right and you need it over there, they'll stick to whatever's over there.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't matter what it is. They'll stick enough that you can then balance and, get set and readjust your hand and then maybe find a better foothold. But they're amazing.
Cool. Have you always worn Sportiva?
Not always, but I've been on the Sportiva team for a long time. I think almost 20 years.
Okay.
So I've tried other shoes in the last few years, just kind of like every so often sample. But I mean, like obviously I love La Sportiva and I'm sponsored by them, but they fit me. And I think that's always the most important thing. Like even when people ask me, they're like, oh, I really like those shoes, but they don't fit. I'm like, well, then they're not for you. Like don't...
Find the brand
that fits. And then rubber does matter. I think the Sportiva rubber is, as good as anything out there. I think they've done a lot of work in that department, and I think there's a lot of worse brands out there.
Right on. What about do you have a go-to stiff shoe for more face stuff?
Yeah, I like the Mura lace up. Like
okay.
I wore the Mura lace up on pretty much anything where it's like dead edging, like where you're just kind of like, I get those tight, so my foot doesn't have to do that much work when I'm edging on something.
Is that what you wore into Bolt?
No, I actually wore a pair of it was that fine line where they were almost getting blown out of the Velcros, and because I did to Bolt fairly quickly, I didn't expect to do it when I did it. So I was actually wearing a pair of shoes to work the route because you're on the Bolt. For people that don't know, it's a 30-meter long route, dead vertical, and I didn't want to be a pair of super tight shoes working the moves and being up there for an hour and a half or whatever.
Sure.
So I wore a pair of slightly comfortable shoes, but the interesting thing on the Bolt is the feet are very, very bad, but they're not edges. They're all kind of like little nub and smears.
Yeah.
And so it worked out well.
Okay.
For me, yeah.
To not have like a really sharp, crisp edge. And
I mean, the crisp edge probably would have worked that go anyway. I've definitely felt dialed in, but it was nice to be able to just kind of throw my feet around a little bit and get them on the smears and then adjust them as necessary. Yeah.
Gotcha. Is there anything you would tell yourself if you could go back and coach yourself when you were 18?
Yeah, I would definitely be the focus on the strength training while you can recover overnight.
Okay.
I
More
think
strength, less endurance.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I was always pretty focused on technique and stuff like that, so I don't think that was a big deal.
I mean, you ended up you've climbed hard boulders. You've climbed the Mandala. I know the opening boulder problem on Necessarily Evil is like V11 or 12 or something like that.
Yeah. But imagine like the amount of time that I've put in and the amount of time that I've been training.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not going to lie. I feel like I should have climbed harder.
Okay.
I mean, when I did 14A, kind of late 90s, 14A was still, kind of noteworthy. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't that far behind some of the top climbers of the day. There's a pyramid of like, the top echelon with like Adam Ondra and Mikos there at the top. And then like, right below that's a whole tier of people. And then there's, it gets more and more and more. I was probably in like the third tier, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm in like the 20th, 30th tier. Like, I don't even know how far down I am. Like, that was actually, so after I did Necessary Evil, 2 weeks after I did it, Adam Ondra came to Vegas.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted a boulder. He was initially, when he came down there, he was hoping to just be on a bouldering trip.
Okay.
But it snowed in Red Rock the night he arrived. And so I was like, hey, like, you can't really climb here. It's, it's covered in snow, but like, we could definitely go and climb some limestone, potentially Necessary Evil or something like that, because it was cold and it's a low elevation crag. And so he went out and he tried to onsight Necessary Evil. Mm-hmm. And he was actually wearing a pair of no-edge shoes, which is the first time I was like, what the hell? There's no way. But because he's so flexible in his climbing style, he never really has to lift his heels. He can always get his feet high enough and smear. And it's like, I've got video of him on Necessary Evil, and it's incredible watching him on it because he climbs it so much differently.
Did you play that at a slideshow at the Smith Rock Spring thing?
Maybe.
I think you did.
I did.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so...
That's cool.
Yeah. His onsight didn't go so well. He fell like at the first boulder problem. And then, but I really consider his like second go the true onsight attempt. And he was up in the crux of Root of All Evil for about 45 seconds to a minute, going back and forth trying to figure out how to do it.
On his red point?
On his onsight. Like he'd fallen at the first bolt and came back to the ground and then was up, onsighted through everything.
Okay.
And was now onsighting through the crux, but he was on his second go. But he was still trying to onsight the crux of Root of All Evil, which is like kind of V10 boulder problem, whatever. But he was like going back and forth. And this is the move that I fell 58 times at. So it was one of these things like, and people are like, oh, are you upset that he almost onsighted, or are you upset that he tried to onsight? I'm like, no, like it's amazing. Like he's, but it was also kind of a realization where like there was a time where I could see the top level. I wasn't at the top level, but I could see it. And I could also visualize, if I trained hard enough, I could be there, Whereas all of a sudden I was like, holy crap, like, no, there's... the world has gone so far beyond what I can comprehend. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And then the cool thing is now, even with bouldering, like you go out and you can see like V15, V16 boulders here, and I can't even fathom. Like I look at this stuff, I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like I'm impressed climbers can do it. Which before like V11, V12 was like cool and it's still cool. It's still cool, guys. Don't worry.
I know it's a funny thing where it's like I totally understand. I feel the same way, and yet. At the same time, I'm like, but the other stuff hasn't gotten easier. Like it's still really hard.
Yeah. But it's interesting to see that the top level has just moved up so much beyond what I can see. And I mean, I've improved a little bit, but just not as much as everyone else.
Well, Adam went on to Onsight Just Do It,
Yeah.
Therefore,
which was ridiculous.
Which was absolutely amazing.
Because the thing about just doing it, I actually expected him to onsight it. I'm not going to lie. Like, I expected him to onsight to bolt. I was a little upset, and so was he, that his foot slipped.
Yeah.
But I knew if he got through the first 4 bolts, though only in the CD section at the bottom, if he got through those first 4 bolts, he could take it to the top. Just do it isn't complicated. The movement on it isn't complicated. The chalk stands out like crazy. You don't need to read a sequence. You just rock climb, and he knows how to rock climb. Mm-hmm. But it was like 42 degrees and breezy, and that bottom pitch, like that dead vertical pitch, those holds aren't good, so he couldn't feel them.
Yeah.
There's no way. No way. I was so impressed that he did it on that day.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed that he did it. I was impressed that he did it on that day. Yeah.
I think that means that you can do it. If you did necessary evil and he did not like that.
Exactly, right? Like logic.
Yeah. If we just logic this out.
Yeah. Trust me,
it's in the bag.
Even in my own logic, I'm upset I didn't do that one when I was there.
The Mike Doyle comeback.
Yeah. Don't call it a comeback.
Is there something that you have been especially grateful for lately?
I just spent a month in Costa Rica. That was awesome.
Tell me about that.
That is one thing that, like, with my job, as much as I work many hours, stuff like that, the ability to work remote is priceless. Like, that's kind of worth suffering a little bit.
That's amazing. So you mentioned surfing when you were doing your Horn Lake, Vancouver Island days. So has surfing always been there? This was a surfing trip, right?
Yeah. The Costa Rica one was the surfing trip. So surfing initially, obviously, I've always enjoyed the idea of it. You know, looks great. Girls in bikinis, warm water.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You've got the hair going right now.
I do. This is for Costa Rica. It was, actually. Now I'm like stuck. I'm like, do I cut it? Because I'm not going back to Costa Rica. Or do I let it go? I don't know.
Sure,
but yeah, exactly. Once I start rock climbing again, because my try-hard hairstyle is buzzed. For sure, for climbing. Like,
okay.
When I did Necessary Evil, I buzzed my hair. And I used to compete. I always used to buzz my hair the night before I competed.
Really?
Yeah. But the surfing, I initially thought it would be a good like rest day activity. Because Horn Lake is on one side of Vancouver Island and the surfing's on the other side. I figured I would climb Friday, surf Saturday, rest, relaxing, it's casual, climb Sunday. Then I went surfing. And I realized surfing is freaking exhausting. It's the hardest thing I've ever tried.
Wow.
I've tried it. I've surfed, and that was like early 2000s, and I've surfed kind of since then. I'm no better. I suck at it. But
mostly the paddling and the upper body,
it's
or
exhausting. Yeah,
all
paddling.
of it?
The paddling.
Okay.
Yeah, like you spend much more time paddling than you do standing up. You stand up for 5-10 seconds. A 15-second ride's a huge, like a long ride.
Yeah,
and you got 3-minute paddle back out, and then if the waves are pumping, you're 45 minutes to an hour trying to paddle out. You know,
is it good cross training? You think?
It uses some of the same muscle groups, but it's definitely hard. It's not recovery. Like so it's not necessarily cross training, but it's definitely some of the fitness translates very well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then it quickly shifted to climb Friday, climb Saturday morning, drive across the island, surf Saturday night, surf Sunday.
Okay.
Don't try to surf
Come
in
back.
between. Yeah, because you also spend 8 hours in the water. Your skin is soft.
Yes,
and
salt
Horn Lake's
water.
quite abrasive.
Yeah.
So you come back. It was just, I think I did that once where I climbed Friday, surf Saturday, climb Sunday, and I didn't rock climb Sunday. I pretended to, but yeah, it was a waste. And then since then, I tried to take like a little bit of downtime off from climbing, maybe starting about 10 years ago. And that was kind of when I would focus on like go surfing and started going to Costa Rica.
One chunk of time a year.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I was going to Costa Rica kind of for 2 weeks in the winters for a few years, and then started Necessary Evil. And Necessary Evil is a winter climb, so I actually didn't go to Costa Rica.
Okay.
For 3 years, I think.
Gotcha.
And then went down for a month this year, which was awesome.
Yeah, good trip.
Oh, phenomenal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have community down there? Do you have friends that you run into? And
yeah, I had friends that came down and stayed with me. Like different friends came down for like a week here and a week there. And I met people down there and now have a little bit more of a community. The area where I go has like this brand new fitness center that was super awesome. And
nice.
So I'd go in there and like do a workout after surfing and had a little hangboard and took that like Metolius, the light rail one down and would hang it up. And all these guys that are, you know, massive weightlifters are so impressed I could hang on a small crimp, which is great. So I had a little in with the little...
I know.
Yeah.
God, if any climber wants to feel good about themselves, just go to like any gym where, you know, meatheads are like benching a lot and just do some weighted pull-ups.
Yeah.
Like blows their mind.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many plates you have on your waist. It's like, I'm just warming
what
up.
I do. Yeah.
This is what I do. Yeah. What's next for you? What's coming up?
So definitely going to back up to Canada for the summer.
Nice.
Not really sure this spring. I think I'm trying to rehab my elbow. So I, tore the common flexor tendon. seeing how that's going. It's not going as well as I would like right now.
Yeah. I'll follow back up with you. I'd love to see what you learn and see what ends up working, and we can hopefully pass that on for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like
And
it's been-
I'm going to be doing a bunch of kind of just running. I think it's going to be like my fitness focus right now.
You've mentioned that a few times. Do you think that helps your climbing, or is that
I don't
just...
know if it helps. Well, that's not true. There's a few things, like, depends what your goal is. So everything, you have to go back up to that. Like, what is your goal? If your goal is just weight loss, people will say, well, no, it's more effective to do like actually like weight training, stuff like that, where you're, even after the workout, your body's still, consuming calories.
Yeah, high intensity interval sort of stuff.
And people will like say that. I'm like, well, that's great, but that's one thing. But like the thing about running, honestly, that I think translates best to climbing, it's not the fitness, because I think even the interval training is more effective for climbing. Climbing is much more interval, like at a rest, boulder problem, rest, boulder problem. The thing that translates the most to climbing is that it's easier to stop. So when you're running, it's always easier to just stop. And I don't enjoy running that much. So the mental part, I enjoy it once I like am really in it, but like the mental part of pushing yourself and being like, no, don't fucking stop. Keep going. That translates to climbing. And I actually, if I'm running a lot, climbing's easy because I'm out and I'm pushing myself, and getting into that mentality of pushing yourself translates to climbing. But if I can't climb that much, definitely I enjoy big days in the mountains and being fit enough to move quickly over easy terrain. And I think so. When I'm talking run, I'm talking trail running and like more like power hiking to scramble to whatever, not just road running.
Gotcha. So more of that in your immediate future, and some rehab, and
Yep.
and then back up to Canada this summer. Any other trips on your radar?
I'm going to go to Japan for the Olympics. So Sean
cool.
McCall qualified for the Olympics, and I want to go watch that. So
That's awesome.
I'm going to go to Japan to watch the Olympics, and then in September, I'm definitely going to Spain. My dad's turning 70. He's walking on the Camino to Santiago. If people know what that is. I'm going to go walk for 4 or 5 days with him.
Oh, awesome.
He's doing like 30, 35 days. I'm going to just, go 4 or 5 days and then go climbing in Spain.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then that's, I think, as far as I've planned out right now. Yeah. And
Okay.
I like doing that. I like planning 6 to 8 months in advance.
Yeah.
Then I kind of can communicate with people, make sure people are available to belay me. And, it's basically even just let my work know like what my schedule is.
Got you. Well, one last note that I have here that I guess we can wrap up on. I listened back to that conversation that you had with Neely, and you were talking about your weight loss component of Necessary Evil, and one key component was just ditching beer, and your replacement was Woodford on the rocks. And I've got some Woodford here.
Oh, amazing.
In the van. So I figure we can wrap this up. And
that's a lot of time spent in
clink our
Kentucky right
glasses
there.
and-
Actually, so the Woodford's also I've got a funny
I love
story.
it. Yeah, let's do it.
So I had a trip planned to Kentucky from Vegas here, where I was going to fly out to, flew into, I think, Louisville, and then go out to the Red for a week and then fly back. And I was going to meet a friend from Toronto down there, and like Bill Ramsey was going to fly out from Vegas with me, and a few other people were going to fly out from Vegas. They canceled a little earlier, and then the weather was not looking good. But Bill was out fly fishing for 4 days before the trip, so I couldn't get a hold of him. So,
Okay.
And so my flight was at like 10 p.m. His was at 10 a.m. the next morning. So at 10 p.m., I'm on my flight. I land in Louisville. I get a message from him being like, I'm canceling my trip. The weather doesn't look good.
Oh, shit.
So he's not showing up, right? So now I'm in Louisville. He's not showing up. Like, okay, whatever. I go to bed, wake up. My buddy from Toronto had to bail.
Oh, no.
So now I'm like, and I know people in Kentucky, like it wasn't a big deal. I could have definitely, but I was only there to socialize because I was actually going to be working so much. I wasn't even planning on climbing. Like I'd already booked the hotel, booked the cabin, and knew that I was going to be mostly working and just kind of hang out with friends. So I go into Lexington. I've got a bunch of friends. I met a friend for breakfast. He was too busy that day to go climbing. It was a Sunday. The only good weather, and then it was going to be crap weather for the next 7 days. So I was debating, like, I could drive out to the Red. I'm sure there's people I know out there. I'd be able to, get a belay, turn around, and then, suffer it for a week in the rain. I'm like, or I could just go to Woodford, do a little tour, sample some bourbon, and then flew back that evening. So I actually flew to Kentucky, went to Woodford, grabbed a bottle, flew back to Vegas.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
But yeah.
Great climbing trip.
Oh, perfect.
One of the best.
Probably my best trip to Kentucky, actually.
Cool. Well, let's go find some ice.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.